Good morning, Livingston, and welcome to a first of its kind program here on Livingston Education on the topic of mental health. I'm Mike Raymer, and with me is my co-moderator, Earl Smith. And welcome to our all-star panel of Livingston parents, psychologists, and authors. Jason Shapiro, Ilana Kipnis, Andrew Greenberg, Michelle Pearl, Roma Coley, Gina Vaccaro, and Sherry Lovenheim. Thanks so much, everyone, for being with us here today. For all watching, please participate in the live stream by posting your questions and comments. This is a big topic, and we have a lot to talk about, so let's get right to it. Now, I hand it over to Jason, who will give an overview of today's discussion and start the dialogue. Jason?
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. So, today's purpose really is to discuss mental health and normalize the conversation about it. We want to make it as normal to speak about our mental health as we do our physical health. And if you believe that life challenges impact our mental health, then this is not a 1 in 5 statistic. That's very important. Something we want to drive home. It's a 5 in 5 statistic. We all deal with mental health challenges at some point in our life. So let's talk about it and support each other. We're going to talk a little bit about schools and how can schools do a better part in normalizing this topic in the classroom. Do we have the right mental health tools, right programming for students? Let's talk about the pandemic. Everybody's going through it. How has isolation impacted adults and children? And in so many cases, Mike and team, this pandemic has taken away our distractions that used to keep our minds busy. So those are a few topics that we're going to discuss today amongst many, many more with this great panel. And it's a sensitive topic. We know it. But we encourage everybody, please comment in the live stream if you feel comfortable. What you put in there could help somebody else. Really. I think that's one thing we really want to drive home. So I'd love to kick it over to Andrew Greenberg. Andrew, you are a psychologist. And thank you so much for joining, Andrew. Why is it so important that we normalize this topic around mental health?
So I'm very happy to be with you guys this morning. Well, because it's reality, right? So like you mentioned, physical health, it's reality. Everyone's getting their bodies checked. And if they have a headache or a stomach ache or a leg ache, they're very open about saying this hurts. And there is no difference beyond what we have as a culture stigmatized mental health to be. And I think that's really so important when you mentioned, Jason, normalizing the conversation. There's such a big stigma created with mental health. And like you said, everyone's got something, and the stigma is what leads people to, hide in it. And also the, culture is assigned it as some form of weakness or not able to deal the way you should be, which is part of the, the misunderstanding, because we deal with what we deal with the way we deal with it. So I think that's so important, that, addressing the stigma, of being aware of that there is a stigma, and talking about it, normalizing, this is what I deal with, and I'm okay with it.
And I think one thing, Andrew, and thank you for that. I think this whole group in general, we want to get to a point where when somebody asks you how you're feeling, that you can be honest, right? Or whether it's a boss, a coworker, a friend, how many times does somebody ask us, hey, how are we doing? How are we feeling? Your immediate response, I'm doing great, Mike. I'm doing great, Ilana. Meanwhile, you haven't slept in 2 days because you've had a family tragedy, or you're going through something, a real serious life challenge. So I think what we want to talk about today is when we let our guard down. And of course, everybody's got a different level of comfort with what they want to share with people. But when you let your guard down and you can say, Andrew, I'm not doing that great. Andrew can then share, or Ilana can then share and help and give perhaps some suggestions, because the next person's going to go, I went through the same thing. back in 2005 or 2008. And I think that's how conversation gets started. So I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in just in general before we dive into the specific topics around kind of this whole, when we normalize the conversation like we're doing today, we can help each other.
I
I
think,
just think, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I just think that there is a huge level of acceptance that needs to go in everyone's mind. The person who's going through it, the family who's watching this happen, and the society who witnesses people go through this. Once we embrace that level of acceptance within ourselves, we give that permission to everyone around us to feel okay with it too. So I believe that social transformation around topics like this happens at a personal level first.
Mhm.
I kind of was going to piggyback off of that, I guess, and just, reiterate what Andrew just said, which is we all will accept if somebody has diabetes or cardiac issues, or a kid gets diagnosed, with something rare or whatever. And we all post these amazing challenges and this and that, but nobody's going to post a challenge for mental health because that is not acceptable. But once we make it acceptable, once we start posting these challenges and say, hey, that's no different than cancer, that's no different than the rare this, the rare that, we start to make it become the day-to-day struggles that everybody can share instead of hiding in a corner and pretending that you're not living, these lives.
Yeah, Alana, I think you make a great point, because especially for children, they're so big with the social media. So what they're looking at is they're looking at little snippets of people's lives, and they think, oh, look at this. It's great. You're happy. You're this, you're that. You're not seeing all the behind the scenes. So I think the children are afraid to speak out, like, I'm not okay. I don't feel so good today. So we
Right.
have to let them know that it's okay. And this is not reality. Like what you're seeing on Instagram and Facebook, and it's not real, so that's really important too.
Yeah, Michelle, you
Well,
bring up
I would,
oh,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jen. I would just say it's the reality that people want us to see that we put out there.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
yeah.
And I was going to say, I tell my daughter too, it's the highlight reel of people's lives, just like you would put together a sports highlight reel. No one's giving you the crying in the corner, or that, whatever, challenges were happening that day. You're getting the best of people. And it's important for our children to understand that, to your point, Michelle, it's not always reality.
Right.
Sherry, please
Yep.
share with us your thoughts. You're a school psychologist, yes?
I am. I know that there is a very little portion of the return to school program from the state down to the districts. The logistics of the PPE and the 6 feet and the safety, the physical safety of returning to school is getting the bulk of the attention. But there certainly is a tremendous need for attention around the mental health and the way our kids are going to show the adults that they need help without realizing that they're showing it, because we have to be more educated and more aware and more tolerant to understand what their behaviors are trying to say. And it speaks to the whole history we have of mental health being sort of an afterthought, that the mental health return to school is not getting as much attention as the other stuff. We even talk about how the academic slide is going to be there, how kids may have lost a year of academics, and how everyone's going to be behind, and how, oh, okay, well, that's just the way it is. So everyone's behind. So that's not so bad because everyone's suffering from it. But everyone's going to come back to school with something, even the ability to go back to a classroom and not be on a device to learn. We have to get back to that at some point, even as adults, and especially as kids, social media becomes addictive, and asking a kid to sit through a class without their device is going to be challenging. We're going to see acting out behaviors because it's almost like we're going to have withdrawal.
That's such a
You
good
know,
point, Sherry.
There's that
I
aspect
think,
too.
yeah, so children especially, I mean, some adults too, but children especially may not have the language to know how to say, I need help. They don't know how to specifically ask for help. So having these conversations and bringing, normalizing these types of things, I think is important. And especially they speak to us through their behaviors, right? So we really need to be paying attention. That's such,
It's absolutely crucial that everyone from the teachers, and I don't mean to list faculty in order of importance or order of relevance, everyone
Mhm.
has to be aware of coming back in, the staff also, among each other, that behaviors are an indication of what's going on inside. I know in the district where I work, I'm on a committee that is looking to put together professional development for staff to educate them about children's behaviors and what they mean, more so than normal. In the past, there's always been a committee on crisis, if a child is in acute crisis. But now we're going to have prolonged trauma, and it may not look like crisis, but it's prolonged trauma. It's stuff that they were never able to talk about or had no one to talk about, and now they're in school and their grades are dropping and they're not showing up to school and they're not doing homework and they're getting into social discord with friends and enemies. And it's crucial that every district equip everyone in their faculty with more knowledge of the normalcy of poor mental health, mental dishealth or lack of health, and recognizing the symptoms and not just referring children out to professionals outside of the school, but equipping the staff with the ability to help internally.
Yeah.
It's a challenge.
One question I'd love to throw out to the group is, I know Sherry, you talked about noticing behaviors. How do we address the children that are still straight A students, right? And they're struggling internally. Parents may not know, teachers may not know. In school, they look like the air quote perfect child, right? They're not acting out. They're not in, any sort of discord with friends and things like that.
Yep.
What can we do as parents? What can schools do it as parents? Because when we look at some of the most troubled children, a lot of times they're camouflaged and they are not on the teacher's radar at all.
Jason, so you bring up a really good point. So I think there's also a lot of gray area as far as what roles schools should play in, as far as mental health, because I know some parents, feel like it's solely on them. For me, I feel like it's a partnership. These kids are in school a good chunk of the day. But, what roles should schools play?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what tools should schools have to help identify the children that are, again, straight A students and perfect by all accounts in the classroom? And I think we all know that we have older children. Sometimes the older children get, the less parents are even aware of the feelings and emotions. So I think it's important for us to also talk today a little bit about, Michelle, you're straight. What is the role of the parents and what is the role of the schools and how can they work together and collaborate?
Well, also, I teach preschool. So much of the learning in preschool is that, SEL piece, the social emotional piece. As the kids get older, we don't teach that because, quite frankly, there's not time in the day for that. So, we kind of assume that they're good. They got this already, but they don't. A lot of these kids, they don't have healthy coping mechanisms, so that's also something, that we need to be aware of.
Something that Jason and I worked with the schools right now was you want to attack as early as you can, which is what Michelle is saying, preschool, elementary school. But the kids come home and they went to a seminar and they're 7 years old and they sort of got it, but they sort of don't got it. And they come home and they tell you they had a great day. And yeah, I went to a seminar, or maybe they don't even mention it at all. So when we were talking with the members of the Livingston Education Department, Jason and I mentioned that, how can I have the correct verbiage as a parent to use to my child? How do I know what happened in school today? So part of what they're supposed to get on the initiative is to send us emails with full, I don't know what the right word is, but a full documentation of what the child learned today. So I can talk to them about their buckets and their whatever and say, hey, I heard you learn this, but it's yet to be sent out. I'm hoping it's going to be. I think Jason can answer more on that.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point, Alana. And it's almost like we need a key, like when you're looking at a map, right? Like, I'll say to my son, hey, have you guys talked about, mental wellness and things of that nature? and I finally dig it out, and he uses some term that I've never heard of. So it might be happening in the schools, but we as parents need the terminology to be able to sit down with them and ask them, because if we don't, we're speaking two different languages. So you're right, Alana. It's critical that parents are brought up to speed in regards of something as simple as just knowing the terms that are being used in
Agreed.
school, so we can at least prompt that conversation with them.
And that goes back and forth between where's the role of the school and the parent. I don't see it any different. I think we're equal. I think our
Yep.
roles are equal. And once we make it equal and across the board, where I could say, hey, you learned this and now I know, so let's talk about it some more, then I as a parent can partake in that education. Otherwise, I'm in the dark.
Do
Yeah,
we still do
and-
mother-daughter night and father-son night and things like that, or was that a dream? I remember seeing at some point that there would be things like, maybe it's the district where I work, very young, a mother-daughter night where there's counselors that come in and talk with young children and then adolescents about becoming a woman, and with your mother sitting right there, or a female relative, and then
No, we
boys with the
definitely don't have that.
that would be a wonderful an idea we could do.
Could I ask you all, what are the schools doing now? Is mental health being taught in health class? You know?
There is a very small chapter or unit in the health curriculum in middle school. But it kind of piggybacks a lot onto drug and alcohol awareness, healthy choices, more so than when I grew up. I remember growing up and there was no talk of that at all. So I'm glad to see that. It starts the conversation for me as a mom. But it doesn't go much deeper than that.
And
it's
again,
sort of,
that's where Jason and I went to the higher ups and had this conversation and said, we need groups, we need more, we need more. So at the Heritage Middle School level, currently, there's a group called Livingston Mind Matters. Now the kids don't find it cool. So we're trying to figure out, that to me is the biggest factor that has to be addressed. How do we make kids realize it's not about having this diagnosis, it's about the fact that Jason said 5 and 5. 5 and 5 people struggle. Therefore, you're one of the 5 and 5. What's bothering you today? How can we open up the conversation? What happened on Snapchat? What happened on TikTok? Who left you out that made you feel this way? Because it doesn't matter what walk of life you're coming from, everybody gets affected, and what affects you matters to you. And that shapes your future.
And, so going to piggybacking on what you said, Alana, so there is a direct correlation between the rise of technology, the rise of social media, and the decline, there's a decline in mental health. Technology is not going away. So, we can do the math. It just means a further decline in the mental health. So we need to get on this.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing too, Sherry, I'd be curious, being in the education system, how are we bringing technology into the schools? There are apps, there are ways out there that we can tap into children's emotions and feelings. And, as Alana said, it's a parent school collaboration. Everybody's in this together. So that's another thing, Alana and I've work with a nonprofit. They have technology, they have apps, there's things of that nature that can tap into, again, the perfect looking children that perhaps maybe are not. How do we leverage technology? So I don't know if anybody out there can speak to that, or Sherry, if you've seen anything.
It's like a lot of things, it's local and it's district specific. A lot of districts have different policies on a lot of things. And, my daughter sits on her Chromebook and the teacher knows what pages she has up. She uses GoGuardian and she knows what my daughter's looking at. The district where I work, the children are allowed to participate without their cameras on. So how do you know what's going on? I think before we can go forward in a productive way, there has to be a uniform policy. I mean, if, states are in charge of their local districts, it's got to be uniform in that way. And then at the same time, gone are the days when kids left school and, if you were bullied in the cafeteria, That was it. You didn't have to deal with it really as much until the next day. However, you would go home and you would suffer in silence. Now, in addition to that, humiliation and sadness and is 24/7. Kids are on social media talking about what went on in school 24/7. They can't get away from it. And so while it's important to monitor, and I would try not to say censor, but monitor what kids have access to during the school day, we also have to realize that they will get access to it when school after 3 o'clock. So we have to be educated about it, and at the same time, just have start with a uniform policy about what's expected. I mean, pre-pandemic, within the last 5 years, there became a policy that the name of it is failing me. Something about a device, where certain children in the school where I work were asked to bring their phones to class because they needed it to participate in Kahoot, or they needed it to participate in some lesson. They were asked to bring their device. Other classes, if you had your device, your phone in class, it was confiscated and sent to the principal's office. So kids are not getting very consistent messages. And as parents, we all know we have to be consistent or we're wasting our time.
Alana, could you speak to more about the club that you mentioned at Heritage? And are there other similar clubs at the high school, and how early does it even start in the elementary? Talk to us more about that Heritage Club.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the goal was to start this conversation as early as we can in life, to have the same conversation I'm having right now with you, but at the level of a child with really minimal adult involvement other than supervision from the periphery. So the thought process was, hey, come here and let's just chat. Let's have a conversation. And if I want to talk about the fact that, yeah, I have OCD, or I have an anxiety disorder, or, you know, this is how my day was affected, I can. It is not in any of the other schools as of yet. It has just been implemented at Heritage. I believe it's happened maybe 3 times or less. To answer or to kind of jump on another topic that we were discussing about before, they're lonely. These kids are lonely. And, you know, yeah, they might be in small groups that they're allowed to hang out in, but the reality is, as they're developing, they're normally supposed to, and this is where COVID plays a part, they're normally supposed to experience life in a normal setup where they can grow, learn about themselves, and find new groups of friends. Currently, that's not happening. So we definitely impacted their social development as well as all the other aspects. So here you take this group and they're doing it, but it's like you and I. So I don't know how awesome that is right now and how much of a pull it's going to get, because to sit on a Zoom and talk about, you know, what's going on is not as intimate as being next to one another. So my goal is that hopefully once we get back into the schools, they can formulate, whether it be in a cafeteria or wherever it is, and have these open discussions and open dialogue. The goal, the next step that I'm trying to set my eyes on is at the high school level. I've been trying to get it implemented there because at least they do have the correct terms at that age to talk about it with each other. And I do think that we should get it at the elementary level. I don't know how kindergartners would do it. I'm not quite there yet, but I think that at least 5th graders who are very unique, because, and I happen to have a 5th grader, but I've done it twice now. And I realized that it's a very unique age because they're really kid for all those years, and then 5th grade. And there's this expectation to get ready for 6th grade in Livingston, start to rotate classes, put all this pressure on them for homework. I mean, they were literally babies, and some of them are still 10. They're babies acting at the level of a middle schooler, for lack of a better word, and they don't know what those feelings are that are starting to come up. They're developing so at such a speed, but without the knowledge to understand what's happening. So a lot of those fears start to happen in the 5th grade. So how do we address that earlier, I think would be very important.
So I'll address that, Alana. So it absolutely can be done in the early level, the early elementary levels. It could be done again as young as preschool. It would be done very differently. It
Right.
wouldn't be so obvious. I use a program at work called Second Steps. It's the entire program is social emotional learning. We do active role playing. We use puppets. They're identifying feelings. What does it look like to be sad? What makes you sad? So it's done in a more simplistic way, but it's absolutely can be done for the early.
Yeah,
the early
and
level.
Michelle, thank you for saying that. I've been very lucky. I did write a children's book, and I was able to read that book to the classes at my child's elementary school. And I have to tell you, this book is about kind of seeing anxiety and fear through the eyes of a child. And at the end, I asked the students, and again, these were second, third, and fourth graders. Does anyone want to share about a time where they were scared or nervous or afraid? All the hands go up. I mean, as soon as one child speaks about it, the next one, well, I was afraid of roller coasters and I was afraid of playing baseball for the first time. And Michelle's exactly right. Not only can it be done, but the children want to talk about it.
Well-
And I think that was what blew my mind the most was the amount, typically you think, well, no one's going to want to discuss their private feelings or emotions, especially, second, third, fourth. Can they even articulate that? They
Jason,
can.
the little ones are the most authentic human beings you will
Yes.
ever meet. They will
Oh
tell
my
you like it
gosh.
is. They will tell you
It-
it's
it-
terrible
it-
today. They will
Yep.
there's no filter there. And
No.
that's the wonderful thing about the young ones.
You're right. And I would encourage everybody out there, Lana and we've reached out to the school systems, the administrators. I encourage parents out there, anybody that sees this, find out what's going on. There are things going on. I've got a child that is in middle school. I've got one in elementary school. There is an effort being made. I see it much more so than I did a year ago, but there can be more done. And I think it's up to us as parents to be collaborators with the schools. So I don't know, throw it back out there to anybody. Has anyone else on the panel reached out to the schools in the past or, tried to dig a little bit deeper in regards to the curriculum or programming around
Can I jump in?
mental wellness? Absolutely.
To Alana's point, to Michelle's point, to your point, you are absolutely right that it is easy. It's sometimes an oversharing in elementary school. And to Alana's point about fifth grade, and then all of a sudden that jump. I also, to share, I'm a school psychologist in a middle school. So every day, and we all know, it sounds like we have children about that age. In middle school, peer influence is the most important thing. What your friends think of you is paramount, and suddenly your parents don't know everything. If we can sort of focus the district on pinpointing that age group, the fifth graders, the sixth, seventh, and eighth, and into high school also, not to make the other ages less relevant, but because that's where the most change happens. You come in as an 11-year-old sixth grader and you leave as a 14-year-old eighth grader. Your body has changed. Your friend group has changed. You've met kids from across town. You've developed maturity wise. Your brain is in a different place than when you were younger. It's crucial. That is the age where we really need to pilot. And in terms of what the district is doing, a good dear friend of mine and her friends put in a program at Mount Pleasant Middle School called Do Happy. The crux of it is that happiness is not an end game, but it's a process, and that person A does not have a right to be happier more than person B. Person A and B can achieve the same level of happiness based on the effort that they put in. And that, so it's the journey, not the destination. And that there is a way to achieve and find happiness for everybody. And it amounts to movement, and it amounts to charity, and it amounts to finding yourself. So kudos to the parents that spend countless hours doing that. We need more of it. We definitely need more of it.
I was going to ask, that's a great point. And I was going to ask Roma, do you do anything for, I know you're a life coach. What is the difference between how you service or work with adults versus children? I was just curious if you could speak a little bit about that.
And especially when you have your own children, like if you receive an email, like we are in our work day, middle of a work day, we receive an email from a teacher saying, my child didn't finish his assignment or signed out of a class. It kind of questions my parenting. And if I am not someone who's actively working on my mental health, I am going to go down and boil down on my child, not just what he did, his actions, but also on how insufficient I feel as a parent. And that's why I think what Shari just said is, and what Ilana pinpointed about having an equal responsibility, both from the school as well as the parent, is to actively work on our mental health and well-being. I mean, we need to have a routine in place, not just for ourselves as parents, but also for kids, to have something to fall back on, to have something to get out of that mindset. Because like Michelle was saying, what we see on social media is almost like living in a virtual reality 24/7. You're brainwashed. Now, you don't need to be bullied in a school cafeteria. You could be sitting on your own couch and you could look at someone's picture and feel insufficient about your own self. And this is exactly where I feel that as a parent, I make it very important to separate the deed from the doer. That's been one of my mantras, is to combat their behavior, their action, not attack the child, because we don't want to make them feel insufficient in any way. And it comes a lot from how compassionate, forgiving, and loving am I towards myself when I'm making mistakes. And it's really how you are one way is how you are every way. And that reflects then in how I deal with my kids. And it has been a push and pull. It has been a flow of not having it right and then getting it right and then apologizing and then coming as a family unit together. But COVID has taught us that you get that precious time that we were all craving for to spend with our families. Make mistakes, but as a unit, clean yourselves up. Like the Peppa Pig is a classic example. You jump up in the muddy puddles, you splash it over each other, and then you clean yourself up.
You know, Roma, you brought up an interesting thing about the social media and it's there 24/7. For me as a parent, I think we are in a unique situation as well. Our parents didn't have cell phones. They didn't have group texting. They didn't have the internet to worry about. And I know as a parent, I can honestly say I have suffered from watching social media and how, you know, these kids post, and I've fallen, you know, subjected to situations where maybe I had to then start not going on social media and not listening to all these group texts. And that definitely triggers, you know, a situation for a child. If they're watching how your parent is reacting, they're feeling that vibe. And I think that that's very unique in how we play the two roles together of school and parents, because we too are suffering from watching the same situations just at the parental level. So you want to protect, you want to go into that mama bear, papa bear mode where you can help them, but it actually sometimes makes it way worse.
Yes.
So, you know, that's also
there.
a topic that I think is so relevant to the parents of this society. And Livingston, not for nothing, Livingston is a bunch of, you know, very opinionated people. They're wonderful people, myself included, all of us. And we formulate immediately opinions before we give somebody a chance. And what I try to teach my kids are, let's take a step back and figure out what's going on in their life. Why are they doing that? If you can break it down for them mentally, you could hopefully help prevent so much of the drama.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
that's
a
what
great,
the coping
great point.
mechanisms are
Yeah,
like.
yep. Go ahead, Michelle.
No, I
Sorry.
was gonna
No,
say,
that's why
Alana,
coping mechanisms are so important at, you know, at the early level. It's because, you know, these kids, they don't have the brain capacity yet, you know, like adults do, you know, so like they don't have the time to stop, take a minute, react. And listen, I'm not always so good about that myself. I'm, you know, an emotional person. So sometimes they just have to just kind of stop, breathe, take a second. And like Alana said, you know, when we were kids, it's like if your friends did something without you, you didn't know about it, or you knew about it 3 days later and it didn't matter anymore. Now it's like in your face. So it's much harder to be a kid today.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, those are great points. Andrew, I was going to see if you could, I know you and I have spoken about this. There's some really deep psychology behind social media. So Andrew, I was curious if you could talk a minute about the social media aspect and really from a doctor's point of view or psychologist's point of view, it can be extreme. It can be devastating to some people. And again, I know you and I have chatted about that. I think it's worth sharing.
Yeah. So, I'm listening. So I heard Shari got me, she triggered the thought in me when she mentioned the curriculum, the health curriculum, and there's nothing more than really substance abuse that's discussed related to mental health. And then Roma mentioned jumping in muddy puddles. And then I know Michelle mentioned the term coping mechanisms. And that's really where I started thinking that everybody is coping, and the internet and social media and even like prejudging has become a form of, and canceling people has become a form of coping. And I think if we want to polarize the way we, because we tend to do that, but in a way that might not be so bad, is the way we're coping healthy or not healthy? Because we're all coping throughout the day, and even if we don't know it. And what do we do when we feel bored or annoyed or stressed or we're curious? And I think that like coping, talking about substance abuse, it's a coping mechanism. We see it as behaviorally acting out, and it's a form of coping that people, because we are so constantly connected, and being disconnected is part of the necessary human experience. And how are people disconnecting when they have the opportunity? And then regarding regarding people when they are tuned into social media, I made a conscious decision that it wasn't benefiting me to go on to social media. And I personally I just don't do it because I didn't feel it was really benefiting me. There was information that I needed to know. I felt like it was making me more anxious or giving me more of a feeling of inadequacy. But then again, I grew up when I know what it's like to not have social media in my life. Children, it's all they know. So it's very, very challenging. And somebody said that, not everything is as it seems, just because if you were watching a TV show that portrayed a family, everything in everybody's lives was perfect. I wonder how that kind of compares when we go on social media. It's much more amplified because, for example, the kid who looks at a group on social media, well, their identity is tied into that group much more so than if you were watching a TV show. So it's a big challenge. As far as Jason, you asked me about social media.
Yeah, totally. Gina, we haven't heard from you in a minute. I'd love to get your perspective on any of the topics. I know you bring a great wealth of information and knowledge on this subject.
Thank you. I was just reflecting on what Andrew was saying about social media. I have sort of a funny story. My daughter was 20 at the time this happened, and she's in recovery for substance abuse, and she has anxiety and depression. And she, I go online one day and I open up my Instagram and she's not there anymore. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, something awful happened. So I call her up, is everything okay? And she says, yeah, Mom, it was affecting me so negatively. I closed my account. I just didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to be a part of it anymore. And I think, like that woke me up. Like I'm thinking, oh, something's wrong, but she had taken control over it herself. And yeah, she's a little older. She's 20, right? She's not 15, and it affects everybody differently. But social media is such a part of these kids' lives. And they don't always know what they're seeing is not real. And to them, it's very real. And they don't know that tomorrow might be better, right? So they get very caught up in the here and the now. My daughter's experience taught me a lot about who I am as a parent. And we're talking about parenting these kids. It really gave me a lot of insight into my mental health and taking care of myself. It affects all of us. Like you said, like that 5 and 5, like if someone in your family is not okay, it's going to affect the whole family. And our journey has been, it hasn't been easy, but it's definitely opened my eyes to the bigger picture of what's going on, not only in families and schools, in our community. And then COVID just amplified everything. I mean, these kids are in crisis, and they need as much help as from every area that we can possibly give.
Yeah, and Gina, great point. And I'd love to throw it back to the group. You know, you're open about challenges that you've had with your child. You know, we've all at some point had challenges with our children. Does anyone want to talk about the importance of, you know, again, everybody has a different level of sharing, different level of comfort, even when you're just engaging with your friends, but what it means to be able to speak to somebody that perhaps might be 20 steps in front of you and can help you. I want to, you know, listen, Alana has been a rock for me in regards to some challenges that I've had, you know, that I've had to deal with. We've had similar challenges, and to be able to call a friend and speak to them when she has already been through something. When we normalize this conversation and we start to break walls down, I think that's one of the most important parts that I'd like to drive home through doing this live, Mike, is that when we break down those walls, we can help each other. And Alana has given me advice or shared things that may have taken me a year, 2 years to be able to kind of learn. So when somebody can do that, it really can make a positive impact in another person's life. So I'd love to throw it out there. If anybody feels the same way or has a similar experience where a friend or somebody was able to help them with a tough situation.
Well, I'm going to say that it was my daughter.
Yeah.
When my daughter was diagnosed with OCD, and it was a struggle and it was hard, and I didn't want to accept it because not my kid. And I didn't want to have her, not because I was embarrassed about the diagnosis. I didn't want her to have anything. Nobody wants their child to suffer, right? I didn't care that it was a mental health diagnosis. It was more that I didn't want to have to face the fact that my child at a young age was going to have to suffer. And as we got older and I was able to talk about it a little bit more, I still kind of kept it to myself. And Jason knows, through the Alliance, the Same Here Alliance, and the We Are All a Little Crazy, I think is what it used to be called, and now it's called the Same Here movement. My daughter did her bat mitzvah project, and she said, I'm gonna tell everybody I have OCD. And I looked at her and I said, but you're gonna get bullied. You're gonna get bullied. And she said, I don't care. I don't care, because the whole point of this is to let people know that we need to start talking, is to let people, and
Yes.
I couldn't be more proud as a parent.
Yeah, she was
And I
very
have learned so
there.
much from her. She is the strongest person. So breaking that down and then having Jason, like he said, talk to him and say to him, hey, Jason, yeah, it sucks. It's normal. It sucks. And we're going to get you through it, but it's going to be rough. It's going to be bumps, and it's not going away, but we need to learn how to deal with it. That's life. That's life. Life is about, my father would always say, life ain't easy, kid. And he's right. It's not easy. And we need to teach them, unfortunately, earlier than we might have wanted to because of COVID, how to cope with real stuff, how to handle real stuff, and how to be real. I'm done hiding it because of her. And I think a lot of us are done hiding it because there's nothing to hide anymore. we need to open it. We need to be proud of it and say, yeah, today I did this because of my diagnosis, and that's okay.
So that's part of the reason, Alana, that my daughter and I and our family has been so open about what she's been through, because if her story can help somebody else through it. I've had people come to me at work to talk about it. I've had people message me, contact me, parents that have heard me speak in other forums. If we can help somebody feel not alone and find their path, then all the better. And that's
Yeah.
why we do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, both of you bring up, it's emotional, it's powerful, it's inspirational, whatever adjectives you want to use to describe it. But I think it's important to understand, and everybody out there to know, that when you speak about it, it doesn't make you less of a parent, less of an employee, less of a brother, less of a sister. Again, we're all going through stuff. And I bring it back in case you missed the beginning. If you believe life challenges impact our mental health, then it's a 5 in 5 statistic. Okay, so I think that's important for everybody to understand. It doesn't make you less of anything to say that you're going through tough times.
I think, yeah, to jump on that with Alana, yeah, how wise is your daughter? And, I think we're really in dire need of wisdom. And, wisdom I see as a combination of intelligence and compassion. For somebody to she's like a little trailblazer, well, somebody who might have something that was different, A, or B, that people wouldn't talk about. And guess what? I'll talk about it. And it's not a big deal, because I think for her, if she, if she's, there's no shame. So if you take away that, that aspect of it, there's always going to be those that their coping style is to bully. So there's always going to be those types of people, because they're at a loss to try to cope with fitting in or adapting in healthier ways. And that's their stuff. At the same time, the more that, people like yours and Gina's kids say, this is what I'm dealing with, and it's okay. It sucks, but it's reality, and I'm not happy about it. I don't like it, but I'm doing my best to manage it. And sorry. And control it and manage it rather than have it manage me.
That's exactly it. That's what I was going to say. And since you said that word, Andrew, I'm going to jump in here. Gina, your daughter's story, Alana, your daughter's story, the common theme I hear there is that they were able to find their inner strength, to leverage their hardship into good. And by taking control of it, the sense of the loss of control and the decision to control it back led to their healing. I went to school, not in anywhere near here, and I had quite a bit of mental health challenges. I chose to understand myself better, and I was able to have the privilege of therapy. I went into school psychology because I feel that the schools are the perfect partnership for parents. And at the age when children are still under our roofs and our children, we should partner with schools to promote mental health. To that point, I don't know what, I really come from a place of ignorance. I don't know what power we as parents have as stakeholders in our children's in public school, in terms of what the curriculum looks like, or how important it is to have mental health professionals. If there's one counselor for 2,000 kids, it's an undoable job. So I don't know what power as parents we have to affect change, and by doing so and looking into that and having our kids do it with us, maybe we can take back some control. To say that we need more from the schools and we're going to help, we're going to do it together, we're going to help. But, maybe the budget for more counselors in school, maybe looking at the curriculum and making mental health more of a priority, not just, one lesson in health class. Can they change the curriculum? I'm asking the question sort of rhetorically, but that might be a good place for us to partner with our children and share our stories and affect change that way, especially because times have evolved so much.
Super great points. We talked earlier prior, Livingston has SACs, right? Student Assistant, is that SAC, right?
I thought it was always substance abuse counselors. Am I wrong? That's not what it stands for?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what it is, but they're called.
Student assistant counselors.
Okay.
Question for the group. Of course, there's guidance counselors. Here's something that's been talked about. Do you think the guidance counselors should have social worker type skills or emotional wellness type skills, or is that crossing the line?
I think we need more of them, if nothing else. We need more of them.
Gina, you were saying something. Do you? No. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that? Should guidance counselors have more of those types of skills?
Yes. Well, not necessarily, you could have a guidance counselor doing, at least in the high school, like the college prep and the scheduling. And then you can also have, a social worker to do the social emotional. So they could be, listen, you can't expect one person to do it all. It's just not possible or not fair to put that. But, I don't know if there's money in the budget or anything like that, but that might be an idea to get, more social workers in the schools.
I agree. And I know nothing about what that SAC, I never heard anything about that. So I wonder how many parents know that person exists for their child because again, like Jason said, if your child looks like the perfect student and the perfect kid, how's that kid getting put in with that person to address? So social workers, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's mandatory evaluations or mandatory just 5-minute check-ins with students,
Yeah, you're so right, Alana. And Michelle, I think you've brought up checking on our children as well. Like there's resources out there when you need them, and usually when we reach out, it has reached an escalation point, right? We're reaching out because there's something that happened. So how do we backtrack or rewind to identify issues with our children prior to it getting to the boiling point where, I would imagine, and I might be wrong, but people are reaching out to find out the resources once they need them because they're kind of in a panic and they need to figure out how to help their child. So
it's like a breast screening exam, do they have the BRCA1 gene? We need to screen our kids beforehand. We need to get this done beforehand, attack before. That's the goal, right? Of the 5 and 5, of letting everybody know that this is normal, that at some point in your life, doesn't have to be today, doesn't have to be tomorrow, you're going to face a challenge that's going to make your mental health not well, whether it be the loss of a parent or whatever the situation might be. So how do we help you cope beforehand so that you have those mechanisms in place so that when it's really rough, you know where to reach out to, you know who to go to, because I don't think a lot of people do.
Right. Well, that's the problem. We're always, reactive instead of being proactive. So we need to take a more proactive approach.
Right.
I think this panel, Mike, thank you for doing it, is, the first step, just bringing the awareness about.
Super great.
Jason
and Alana. Just
Can I chime in 1 second? I've been sitting here pretty quiet. I just want to, as I say, Alana triggered something on me when she mentioned her dad. Today would have been my dad's 80th birthday. My dad used to always say about parenting, it's the toughest job you're ever going to love. And I realize more and more every day, I realize that when I'm raising my 3 kids. And where I grew, I'm a public school kid, born and raised. I grew up in Elizabeth, and I can remember how it shifted from, I grew up in the late 70s and through the 80s. And I remember how we had guidance counselors and we had health teachers, and mental health was never discussed. And then the big drug thing happened with crack cocaine. And then we had the whole DARE program and don't use drugs. And that became part of the curriculum. But still, that whole mental health point of view was never really discussed. So growing up as an adult, growing up now, here we are in the 21st century. We've lived through 9/11. We're trying to live through a pandemic. We're living through the whole influx of social media and how it's affecting our young kids. I'm not sure who brought it up, but they made an excellent point. We need some kind of social work component in public schools somewhere along the line. And I think Shari asked, how do we go about it? I don't know. I think first things first, we ask the question, is there something built in place? If not, we need to put pressure is a bad word. Ask them in a proactive way to put something in place, because social media is not going anywhere. I can remember as a kid, remember we used to always see those kids, don't try this at home. That was the only warning we got as a kid. We need a bigger warning now for our kids with social media, because I have a 9 going on 10-year-old, and he loves to watch YouTube videos and lots to watch TV. And I can see the little wheels in his head turning. Sometimes, hey, now you realize that's TV. That's not real. Now, what you see on your little laptop, what you see on your iPad, that's not real. Let's be sure about that, because a lot of kids, like you were saying, social media, they take that and they take it to heart and they run with it and they think it's real life. And that can be a very dangerous thing. So I'm all with that whole social worker component. Guidance counselors, they do a wonderful job. They have their place. Teachers have their place, but I think there should be another piece of the puzzle. And
So
I
is
think
that
social work is
something that
definitely something.
do we get like a parent liaison committee together that works with the schools? Because we keep talking about working together, and to Earl's point, like, I don't know how to get it done, but if we had a liaison committee between the parents and the school district saying, hey, today this came to our attention, this is what's going on, because guess what? They don't know what's going on half the time behind the scenes. The parents a lot of times get the word from other parents of something, hey, did you hear so-and-so, whatever. How do we talk to them? We need to have a system in place in Livingston that allows us to have a parent or 2 or 3 or 4, however many, we seem fit, be able to go to a member of the Livingston Education Department and say, hey, this has come to our attention. What are we going to do about it? Hey, we want social workers in our school districts. How do we start that?
What if we started with, it occurred to me, every school has a parent teacher association or a homeschool association, and we do a heck of a lot of fundraising and a heck of a lot of help for the schools that way. What if we started there? And what if we asked them what the proper channels would be? I mean, I used to serve on the PTA in my children's school, and I did a lot of fundraising, but we didn't talk about mental health.
Right.
We talked about
You know,
programs other than fundraising.
Yeah.
I just thought, everybody, no one wants to talk about this or hear or gun violence. And just the other day, I was on with my my son's teacher, just talking about something, progress stuff. And and then all of a sudden the intercom comes on. They're having I don't know if it was just a simulated lockdown, but you heard her say lockdown. We're having a lockdown. So, and so she had to hang up, and everybody, I think politically speaking, all the way up to the president, and for years have been saying it's clear we need more mental health support in the schools for kids and for adults. It's got to be more readily available and more easily accessed. And it's just something that keeps getting discussed. How much progress are we making with that? I don't know, but it's clear that leaders, at all levels have been talking about it. We need more, we need it. And the reasons why are very clear and easy to understand.
Is there a mental health board in Livingston? Is there some kind of association where people can turn? Because that's key as well. It's not just the schools that need it. It's the town, because there's crisis emergencies and things like that.
We have a health department in Livingston, and there are county resources that you can reach out to. But I don't think there's any mental health Livingston.
It's almost like you said with the PTA, like if we could impose some kind of panel between, I don't know where the the steps would be to have to make it settle in, but I do think that the most important thing we could do is get this liaison panel in between the parents and the school.
Was
Yeah,
my
and-
thought, because it's the simplest access for a group of parents to reach the principal of our children's school and ask that the principals talk among themselves and go higher up the, they're very big on the chain of command. So if we start at that point, but we don't stop.
Right.
We-
Jason
Yeah,
and
the
I
other-
don't stop. I can tell you that much. They
Well,
might
and
hate
the other-
us.
Yeah, they and Alana, you also got me thinking here. I know when we were speaking to the administration, we had a fight just to get a small Zoom call. I mean, right? It took us weeks, and they had mentioned that perhaps they would do a bigger community type of Zoom call. And I think, Alana, I maybe that's something we reach back out to say is like, where are we? Like right now, I know there's so much going on, and they're navigating through the waters of the pandemic and all of the, the other stuff that's derived from that. But where are we right now from a mental health programming standpoint, so we can all get stable? I think, Earl brought up the word pressure. Maybe it's not pressure, maybe it's more accountability in regards to where are we at? Because I'm with you, Alana. I'm a little lost. I mean, I don't know exactly where are we in this kind of sea of everything that's going on. And you watch the Board of Education meetings and things of that nature, and it's all about obviously remote learning and in-person learning and getting that all sorted out. But then
And that's
where are
huge.
we?
We
Yeah.
get that all of that's huge. We're not downplaying that at all.
Exactly. And then how do we layer on the mental health component and kind of get a pulse check on where we're at? So
I mean,
just
I'm
kinda
happy to
thinking.
make our emails happen again this week. And
Yeah, and maybe they do a town a town Zoom for anybody that wants to join, to let us know where we are in that process.
yeah,
Guys, this is a great discussion. We're about an hour into it, and let's keep going. We're getting on the path of sort of resources. We're discussing that. Gina, I know, of course, you're involved with a number of different types of programs throughout the town. Curious on if there's been some on mental health type of programs. Before you answer that, though, I want to mention, to make everyone aware, it's one of the best kept secrets in Livingston. There is a parent support group called the Livingston Parent Self-Help Support Group. I believe it falls under the auspices of LMAC, if you're familiar with that. But that does focus on more of the I would say, the physical challenges. What I mean by that, the parents get together and talk about whether their children are threatening family members, they're bullying, sudden changes in personality for the kids, whether they're legal or school problems. So there is some foundation to build on this. But I love the idea. I think, Alana, you brought up of a parent support group. And also, of course, all the topics we're talking about, bringing it into the schools. And so maybe that's an initiative we can start here. Getting back to Gina. Gina, different programs throughout the township. Have you had some? You put on programs? Yes? No?
So as far as my daughter's treatment, no. And I just want to say, I didn't know about that parent group until you sent that out yesterday. Nice
secret Livingston.
It would have been great to know. Where I found my support was through the facility that my daughter had attended, which had recently shut down due to things in the state. It was called Daytop, and it saved my daughter's life, as far as many, many others. I think I was trying to look it up just now. I think the adolescent facility, I think, took on a new name. I know James Curtin is involved with that. He's the executive director, and he's a fabulous person to get in touch with if you need. But I don't know any.
And encouraging everyone watching, or if they watch this, are watching live or in the record, if you have any resources in town or throughout the area, please post them in the comment stream here. We'd love to hear about them. Yes, Gina.
Actually, so there is something called, you may be familiar with, Live Well 07039.
Oh, yes.
And I volunteer teaching that. as well. And that's open for free to all students of Livingston. And that was an initiative taken on by Neely, right? A Livingston mom got together and put a tremendous group of volunteers together to teach wellness classes for free to kids and to teachers in town, just as a way to combat. Look, we know there's issues, right? We know the kids are not okay. We know the teachers are stressed out. It's okay not to be okay, but what are we doing about it? How are we addressing that? So that Live
point-
Well was great to be part of.
Definitely. To that point, Gina, I'm curious, as throw it out to the group or go around the table to say, how do you keep through this pandemic? We're about a year into it, right? It's tough, challenging times. How do you all keep yourself mentally sane? Let's say. I'll get right to the point. How do you keep yourself on track? Do you do?
Assuming we are.
Yeah. It does, right? Our behaviors filter down to our kids, right? Andrew, you probably speak hours on that. But how do you, what do you do? Do a little self-talk? I mean,
so I think it's important to know what works for you, and a little self-exploration, right? Whether it's reading or music or writing or art or dancing or, binging on Netflix with your family, or everybody has that thing that they find calming and soothing, meditation, like whatever works for you. There's a lot out there, but I honestly have to say, even with all of that, it's been a tough year.
It has, definitely.
Yeah.
Share the rock and roll with your kids, right, Gina? Music soothes the soul. Share all the good oldies with the kids.
We actually went back and rewatched High School Musical, which was a big part of their childhood, but that was one of the most fun days we had, just, having fun in the living room.
I think something that for me, I want to address that I think goes along what you're just mentioning, Mike.
Yeah.
When I was growing up and my mother, would have a moment where she might have raised her voice at me or whatever, there was never followed by an explanation that she's human, right? She's my mother and I was the child. I think coping mechanisms to answer to that, part of it is I tell them, I'm having a rough day. I am human. I'm experiencing these emotions and I'm sorry that I did that. And I think that would help so many families, because kids really look at us as these creatures that are supposed to be perfect and not feel what they're feeling and not have a bad day and, come in, make breakfast, do this, go to work, come home, clean up, get them ready and make them be as good as they can be. But that comes at an expense, and that expense is our mental health. And so I do try to take moments to myself where, whatever it might be, yoga, this, that, where I can just find Ilana. And I think that is important. I think every parent, male, female or not, needs to realize that they need to take that time to find themselves. And when they do, they'll be better off for their kids.
Mike, I have a question for Andrew. Andrew, do you feel like that there's still a little bit of a stigma, about going into therapy? For me, my kids have a running joke oh, Mom, you have your therapist today, you have your life coach today, so I'm very big on therapy. It's not for everybody, especially kids. If you're unwilling to talk, you can only get so much out of it. But do you find that there is still a stigma with going into therapy? What's your thoughts?
I think generally speaking, it's much less than we know it to be, or we remember it to be. I think adults, I come across many adults that will, when I was talking to my therapist, and I wonder with kids what that might be a whole different story. I recall on when I was going on Facebook a couple of years ago, I saw a mother from in town who posted, I was and it was so nothing. It was not any big deal whatsoever, but I was just so moved by it, because, which is why I kind of got off of Facebook, because everybody's life was presented as everyone's life is perfect. And she put on, and everyone knew who she was and her daughter. Hey, but she did it so casually. Does anybody know any good child, any child psychologists or child therapists? Like, it was so clear that she was asking for her daughter. And so I was just moved by that because it was so real. So I think people are becoming much more comfortable saying, yeah, I talked to somebody to help, cope. And even if it's something, very significant, like, loss of a loved one, or people, society recognizes, oh yeah, they went and spoke to a therapist. So, and obviously why someone is going to a therapist is their business. So, but I think it's becoming more accepted, because there is a wave of becoming more comfortable, accepting, okay, yeah, it's one way that I cope.
I was just going to say,
my experience, sorry, says a little bit different, Andrew, on that, is that it depends culturally where you are coming from. And there are a lot of people who still consider coming to a life coach as a big taboo. They won't tell their own spouse, they won't tell their own kids, they won't mention it because they are afraid of showing that side of them. And to just, piggyback on what Ilana said, kids do look up to us as in hierarchy, and they think that these are perfect individuals. But there are times we mess up and we say sorry, like Ilana said. But there are also times when our kids are feeling very low about themselves. We can give our own life example of when we went through that time. And really that becomes their strength. And that's when we are consciously parenting and consciously then raising our kids, because that vulnerability is very important. When I have women come to me and they are not saying to their husbands or their family that they are getting this work done on themselves, it hurts my heart. Because if your family doesn't know that you are actively healing, you are kind of, robbing them to see the warrior you are. You stepped up to do the work on you. And that's so brave of you.
I was just going to say, as far as the kids go with therapy, I know with both of my daughters, they know people directly that have committed suicide. So do we pretend that this isn't happening? Do we pretend that everything is okay? Or do we address the situation, right?
Well, Gina, that's like such an important topic, because I didn't know anyone who committed suicide growing up. And now I feel like every day there's another story, whether I know them or not, celebrity, non-celebrity, child. I mean, it's the worst when you hear it's a child. I mean, it's horrible for any human, but I mean, it's very real.
Yeah, Michelle, to your point, my childhood best friend took his life, and I found out when I was, I appreciate that. I was up actually in that area with my my wife, fiance at the time, and I said, hey, let me call my friend and see if he's there. I want you to meet him. And we had kind of talked back and forth for on and off for years. This is before social media. AOL Instant Messenger is what we used to use, and I called up and his dad, had told me, and I was crushed, obviously, and broken and devastated for many years. But I often think to myself, what was he feeling? Because I knew him obviously well. And I always say to myself, if he was if we were in a different society, if society was different, and we've made a lot, this was 2005, we've progressed a lot in a positive way, because we're even having this, Mike, thank you for doing this, because this is what will save lives when people can feel comfortable talking about it. But I believe that isolation and feeling like you're the only one going through these emotions and feelings perhaps could be one of the things that somebody does take their life is feeling. And I always say to myself, if he knew that other people were feeling the same way that he was, or had felt the same way he was, and we were able to have these conversations and as Mike said, or someone used the word trailblazer, you know, what we're trying to do here is knock the walls down. Would that make a difference? So, you know, that's my own story about losing somebody to suicide, and it's devastating and it's heartbreaking. And my hope is that through discussions like this, we can break those doors down or walls
Yeah,
down.
and I love that, Jason, you bought that, because I, at the age of 24, I got married very young, had my own version of spiraling suicidal thoughts. And I have overcome that over the period of time. But and every of my client who comes to me brings themselves to that point, and then they reach out. I wish we meet them in the middle somewhere, you know, by doing this. That's the effort. And I only think that the only way, this whole thing that we spoke about, the knowledge, the consumption of social media, everything that's the knowledge that the school is imparting us, and how can we bridge that gap? The only coping mechanism that comes to my mind are the 2 C's. When we are at the receiving end of our, you know, receiving the knowledge, we are collecting and consuming. And the only way out is by connection and contribution. And that's why counseling, through having social workers and stuff, they teach us how our lives matter more than our own spiraling thoughts of self-sabotage or these of not enoughness, and how then we know how we can connect to the outside world and still matter by our contribution, is when we can have a huge impact on people feeling such feelings. And I actually discussed this with my kids, that I was at a point in my life where I had suicidal thoughts about my own life, and I'm not proud of it, but I'm glad I get to heal from it. And I'm glad I get to share this with you, that never bring yourself to that point. Know that you matter, and in some way or form, you contribute. So I feel like connection and contribution is very important.
And not only do you matter, Roma, that's a great point, but other people, you're not alone. Other people have felt these feelings and these emotions. So, you know, thank you for sharing something so personal, you know.
Thank you very much.
I think that's one.
Yes, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just, real quick, I was just going to say, I think that's one of the, you know, new risk factors, is that we're here, you know, hearing more about people committing suicide, and more for kids, adolescents, their contemporaries, and then celebrities. And, you know, you know, the reason most people take their lives is it's not that they don't want to live anymore. They just don't want to feel the experience what they're feeling anymore. They want to stop the pain, and they don't know how to do it. And it's, as Roma said, a spiral. And so it's yeah, it's something that needs to be you know, addressed early, as early as possible. So just so people don't have to suffer the way they are.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing, Gina, Alana, Roma, these personal experiences. I know I'm in a moderator role, but I'll share not necessarily specifics, but in my late 20s, I was in a very challenging, difficult time and came through it. And you know what? It builds strength, right? It builds resilience. If I had a magic wand and could, for our schools, I would love in some way to, if our kids could be taught resilience, right? Life's a series of ups and downs. We know it as parents, and you're right. Who was the one that said, "Oh, life throws you curveballs," right? So this focus on, as Michelle said, social emotional, and how to build up that resilience against social media, about what others think of you. It's tough, but I would love to see that weaved into the curriculum in some way. Sherry, I know, you know, smart minds are thinking on this.
Why shouldn't it be? I mean, right, you know, Andrew mentioned that he overheard a lockdown going on in the building when there was Sandy Hook, and when there was all those school shootings, and when there was 9/11, schools jumped right at it, and we instituted new safety and security procedures. Teachers, the days we have to go in before the students arrive, there's mandatory training. There's mandatory training. This is a tipping point. This is the time. You know, nothing changes without some sort of occurrence to light the fire. This
Yeah,
is
Sherry, think about these larger forces at play, right? A year of a pandemic and technology. It's a crucible, but look at the silver lining that's come of it. Look
That's
at the
well said.
panel here,
Yeah.
right? And as we're discussing this, raising the awareness, it's a beautiful thing to see in action, and I hope to do more of it. Thank you all so much. As we're coming through this panel, we're about an hour, 20 minutes. Getting back to, are there any, a couple of thoughts on what do you do to keep yourself, I said mentally sane, right? I know Jason has dove into writing books. You're a prolific writer, incredible, the output that you've had, but different things. Guys, my hobby and my passion, Livingston Education Facebook group, right? Comes with its challenges, but loving every minute of it. And of course, listening and learning about you all. What are some of the things that you've dove into and during, and share some of that bit of wisdom, if you could, from each of you. Anything specific, Sherry, do you outside, I think you mentioned you do with your family, different activities, yeah?
Certainly getting out and getting fresh air every day. It's, you know, I wish I was more active, but it's something that I have to work on. I'm not gonna lie, Gina mentioned Netflix, I think it was Gina, Netflix binging.
Yep.
I caught up on a lot of TV, but maybe that was, you know, this was the time for me to watch all those shows I had never watched, but maybe it's just an escape from reality. Maybe it's something that, you know, I was able to, you know, and reading a lot of books too, escape. Maybe kids like to journal, maybe kids like to draw, you know, there's something for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, we as a family, we started meditating together. We started doing workouts together. So my husband set up his own gym, and then he takes my daughter, who's 8 years old, for her treadmill walk while he'll do his biking. So it's been definitely, there is light, not just at the end of the tunnel, but in the tunnel, if you're choosing to see it. But like what Andrew said, I think it's important. These are some ways we can cope, but like Andrew said, I think it becomes important in mental health classes to teach the kids that your pain, or sometimes the curveball that life throws at you, is a gift or a lesson wrapped in pain, but it is one of your most important gifts. That's how you really find you. And that's why we need this kind of education added to our school system with the parent support, where we can teach these things. And then nobody's going to look at it like, I can't live with my life experiences anymore. They will have more compassion and kindness within themselves to overcome that through all of these practices and rituals like journaling, whatever that feels good for you as an individual. You can choose then.
Yeah, it's
I
great.
love what you said, Roma, about there's a light if you choose to see it, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I used to ask my kids when they were a little younger, like at the end of the day, what's 3 good things that happened today? And at first, you know, they were like, ugh, mom, you know, whatever. But, you know, then they started to think and like look for the good things, so they would have something to say. And if you look for them, you'll find them. They're there.
Mike,
I
one of
actually
the
also say that a lot. I
go.
tell my kids, it's a lot easier to find the negative. It's a lot easier to just, for lack of a better word, take the easier way out and just say, oh, it's so miserable. It's this. Let's try to find what was positive. What's the positive in this? How can we see that light in the tunnel? And I love that term, so I'm going to steal it.
I love what you said, Rona. I absolutely loved it when you said life throws you curveballs, but those curveballs are a gift. Wow, that will stick with me.
Yeah. And Mike, one thing, you know, you asked, you know, you mentioned writing. For me, it's not just the writing, it's being able to kind of give back through my writing. And I know I've brought up Alana and I have worked with Same Here, the global mental health movement. For me, that has brought me peace. That has brought me satisfaction in trying to give back in honor of my childhood best friend. Those that know me know that I have a brother that has been fighting and suffering with schizophrenia since 1998. So I do that in honor of them, and that has brought me just tremendous joy to be able to give back, donate most months the profits from my book to Same Here, the global mental health movement. I love when you donate to them, you can kind of pick which pillar you want those donations to go to. So Alana, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about Same Here or the joy or just what you've been even more involved with me with your whole Daughter's Mitzvah project. And I would just suggest to people out there, perhaps giving back to a nonprofit or working with a nonprofit can make you.
I do. I mean, Same Here has helped me tremendously in more ways than just my daughter. We didn't come to Same Here for my daughter. We came to it because of my brother, who also suffers from mental health issues. And we were at a low point in our lives where we were looking for help. And this guy, Eric, came into my life, and we went to the first Same Here movement, and it was amazing. It was in New York City. It was obviously pre-COVID, and we, just got to see how many people in the quote unquote real world, athletes and, entertainers, everybody experiences this, and how we can't keep it quiet. And so from there it spiraled, and Eric has helped numerous schools and numerous organizations. I mean, there was a kid in that hockey player kid who was made to feel embarrassed of having mental health, and the hockey team, it was somewhere in the Midwest, gave her back her money and said, why don't you just make yourself happy? Just here's your money. You don't need to finish out the season. She's like, but I wasn't unhappy. I was just telling you I have mental health issues. And so she donated it to Eric anonymously. And from there, it spiraled into, more anonymous donations of this larger amount to help other people realize I'm not unhappy that I have mental health. I just wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
Alana, please put the link into the comment stream on that. I would love.
You want me to be
share that with the
savvy now?
yeah, when you have a chance. Guys, thank you so much, everyone. This has been
Mike, I'm sorry.
We have a few more minutes. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to you asked a very, very important question before, and I wanted to answer. What do we do for ourselves? What are we doing for ourselves to manage, to cope? So for me, I noticed, and it was kind of like right at the beginning of COVID, I invested in like a pillow for my bathtub. And I sit and I meditate in the bath.
The visual, great. Andrew, the visual.
You send the link for that too?
Right? My husband has one too. It's okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but it's, you know what? It's, think about how relaxing that is. And then, and this is after I started running. I don't know why. I just one day, the gyms were closed. So I just started running and then walking the dog. Stuff that's just so simple. It doesn't take a lot of complex thought to do. And it's been so valuable and important and therapeutic in my life. So I think it's important that we have things for ourselves as well as for our children and the community, and because we are always trying to do so much for others.
Anyone else last minute thoughts before?
Yeah, I love what Ilana said about, just like we spoke about the spiral of pain and self-sabotage, Ilana spoke about the spiral of happiness. How one good thing leads to the other. So if you really open yourself up to it, you can also be drowning yourself into a spiral of happiness. Who wouldn't want that?
Power of positive thinking and karma, right, Roma? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And giving back. We're talking about that. Guys, thank you again so much. This has been an all-star panel. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Inviting me.
I've learned so much from each of you. You're all terrific, new friends. Let's keep this conversation going. Let's think about maybe doing a round 2, mental health discussion round 2 in the future. So let's, Sunday morning, we've had a great, wonderful viewership. Appreciate everyone's comments and questions in the live stream. We'll get back to you. And again, thank you everyone from the bottom of our heart.
I just want to say from this, I've already had 3 parents reach out to me
That's amazing.
Wow.
We're making a difference. So
Wow.
thank you for
That's
having.
great.
That's
That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
and Mike, real quick, what you had said
That's wonderful.
earlier, please, if you see this even on replay and you have a resource that you can put into the comments, please do it. It's so important that everybody understands where they can reach out to and get help and support.
Agreed. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. We're
Thank
going
you,
to say
Mike.
bye for now.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Okay.
Great day.
Thank you.
You too.
Thanks,
Take
Thank
care.
you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.